Welcome into episode 174 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. And tonight, the Bruins get back on the winning track with a 3-0 win up in Winnipeg. Some things that have ailed the Bruins of late in their poor stretch of play was slow starts and just incomplete efforts throughout 60 minutes, in particular in the third period. The Bruins did not play a perfect game tonight by any stretch of the imagination, but two areas that they did improve upon were just those areas. They got a goal in the first minute of the game, starting strong. The rest of the period wasn't that strong, but they started strong, and then they finished the game really strong in the third period against a desperate Winnipeg team. So, Bridget and Scott, did you see anything outside of that jumped off the page to you tonight?
Yeah, I think most importantly, the effort was there all night. It wasn't the cleanest game. Power play still struggled, still stuff to clean up, but a huge step in the right direction just because, as you mentioned, they started better. They finished really strong in the third period when they're up 2-0, eventually make it 3-0 with the empty netter. They were working, and you mentioned it, Winnipeg was desperate. They're a team that's been struggling recently and, seemed to be pretty safely in the playoffs at one point and is now very much fighting for their playoff lives. I think they're just like mere percentage points ahead of Nashville for the 8th and final playoff spot out west. Winnipeg, brought it. I thought they played pretty hard and the Bruins matched it. And that's the challenge. We've been saying it is they are going to face teams that are much more desperate than they are. How do you get yourself up to match it? And I think, it sounds like they had some team, or at least one team meeting. I think Thursday morning before the game. Montgomery said he met with the leadership group. Coaching staff talked, and they just kind of had open conversations about, getting back on track. Bergeron used the word humbled when talking about the back-to-back losses to Detroit and Chicago. So, it seemed like message received and a much better effort. And the kind that they needed against what's been a good team most of the season and one that is definitely desperate right now.
Yeah, a good team with good goaltending. And for Winnipeg, obviously they need the points. They had kind of a tough stretch recently, and they'd fallen from, was it second or third in the conference, or all the way down to the last wild card spot. So they're, like you said, desperate. They got lucky. Nashville also lost to Chicago tonight. So they stay exactly where they are. I think they're 3 points ahead of Nashville right now as it stands in that last playoff spot. I think it's 4 points. I just checked. And yeah, they're a much more desperate team, but the Bruins played like the more desperate team, especially that third and fourth line. They had a lot of shifts where they were outworking the guys they were on the ice with. They had more speed, and somebody that we'll, I'm sure, talk about. But Hathaway had a great game, but also Lauko had in the second period in particular some really good shifts after all those weird transactional moves, taking him up and down more for cap space reasons. But he had a really, really good shift in the second period that he got, I think, 3 pretty decent scoring chances on, and then also just had a strong game. That whole line kind of pushed the pace, and sometimes recently when the Bruins top 6 weren't doing anything, the bottom 6 still was bringing that energy, and you see Trent Frederick get goals in back-to-back games, and you see Bertuzzi set it up, and you see some positives from that bottom 6.
Yeah, I thought that fourth line was really strong tonight. For sure, I thought they were probably their most consistent line. I thought at least as far as bringing energy and just kind of playing in your face. The third line obviously kickstarted things for the Bruins, and we talked about it last episode, I believe, how Coyle and Frederick offensively had seemed to slow down a little bit, or maybe we spoke about that before the Blackhawks game. But since we talked about that, Frederick has 2 goals, and it's been a couple of games now in a row with Tyler Bertuzzi on their wing. And are they related, by the way? It's uncle and nephew, right?
Yeah, Todd's his uncle.
Yeah. Anyway, so they've had a few, at least 3 or 4, maybe 5 games together, at least maybe not full 60 minutes, but close to it. And to start tonight's game, they had a very similar goal to the one that they scored in Boston in Bertuzzi's first game. I think it was against the Rangers.
Yeah, it was a Coyle goal. It was to Coyle who was out there.
Yeah, so it was similar. Good work down low, protecting the puck, and then finding the open man in the slot. In Boston, it was Coyle, like you mentioned, Bridget. Tonight, it was Frederick. I still think that line is working out a lot of kinks, especially in transition. And you can definitely tell that Bertuzzi's still trying to find his way, and that's understandable. But when they're beneath the dots, that line is finding some success.
Yeah, their board play is really good. They have a lot of guys that can, like Coyle and Bertuzzi, and even Frederick can win those board battles, and they're strong skaters, so it's hard to take the puck away from them in those situations. I noticed that exact play. They've been successful with it a few times. That you mentioned the one in Boston, but I think in Chicago they had a play like that too. Or at one of the games recently, they tried that again where they win the puck battle along the corner boards or the end boards, and they throw it out in front, and either Frederick, Coyle, Bertuzzi, somebody's waiting out net front in the low slot to just poke it in. And it looked easy when they did it today. No one was really guarding Frederick, kind of a defensive breakdown, but I mean, that play works. It works for them. You're getting a very in-close shot, so a high percentage shot on those kind of plays. And, you know, if they get one of those every other game, or if they get a look at that whenever they can, that, you know, that's a good scoring opportunity.
Yeah, and it's just important for Bertuzzi to start to feel comfortable somewhere, and which I think this is the line where it's going to happen. This always seemed like the most natural fit, mostly because you didn't really have any reason to split up your top lines. And, you know, as I said before, totally understand wanting to test some different things, see how he looks with Krejci and Pastrnak, see how he looks on the top line. But ultimately, playing with Coyle and Frederick for now, at least until, you know, Hall and Foligno eventually get back, and then you have to figure some things out. But for now, this is what makes the most sense. And he looks like he's starting to get more comfortable there. As Brian mentioned, there are still some things to work out. But especially when they get in zone and, you know, get cycle game going, get some possession, like you can see, you know, how this is going to work. And you can see that, like, all right, this is a trio that can be successful. Bertuzzi now has assists in back-to-back games, still waiting for his first goal as a Bruin, but, you know, has a few points now, and I think can build off that. He's taken a few more shots in the last couple games. So they looked pretty good for the most part. The fourth line was great. They were just awesome all night. When they're on the ice, Bruins shot attempts were 7-1 Bruins. They were spending a ton of time in the offensive zone. Lauko draws 2 penalties. He only played 6. I was just looking at it. 629 total in the game, but led the team in individual scoring chances. Like, he was all around it. Had one shift where he had like 3 scoring chances. One was a good save, and then, you know, another he missed the net on. But yeah, I mean, first game he's gone into in, you know, I think like a week and a half, 2 weeks now. And, you know, not that Greer really deserved to come out of the lineup. I don't know if there's some sort of minor injury there, but Montgomery had said he wanted to get Lauko into a game on this trip at some point, so they get him in tonight, and he definitely makes the most of it. His last 2 games that he's played have been really strong, and it's, you know, again, another reminder just of how deep this team is, because Lauko can play at this level, and you could plug him. You know, I just mentioned he played 629 tonight. He could give you a good 629 in the playoffs, and that's all you need from a 12th forward. So, yeah, good for him. He had all those transactions, which were really, I wrote about this yesterday because, like, people have been so confused about it, but they're just paper moves that spare the Bruins. So you're only allowed 4 regular call-ups between the trade deadline and the end of the regular season. So you make it an emergency call-up instead, and those are unlimited. So you can just do that as many times as you want. You can say, you know, someone's a little banged up, we're not sure if he's going to play. You can call Lauko up, and then you have to send him back down once you have a healthy roster for a game. So that's why it's been every day up and down. Doesn't actually mean anything. He's not flying back and forth to Providence and wherever they are on the road. So he's been with the team the whole time, but they just have to do that to save themselves some moves for potentially later in the season.
So I have a question for you too. Is I'm going to leave Nick Foligno out of this equation because I feel like if he's healthy, he's obviously going to be on that fourth line, and it would probably be Nosek, Foligno, and Hathaway. But let's say that Foligno isn't able to go for playoffs or whatever, and you're looking at Hathaway, Nosek, and either Greer or Lauko. If Lauko's on top of his game and Greer's on top of his game, what do you think the difference is? What do you think the line looks like differently with those two on their game, and which maybe would you prefer if they're both playing to their ceiling?
I mean, I say Greer, but it's close. But I think if we're saying they're playing to their ceiling, it's close, right? They have similar ceilings. They bring similar things. But Greer's been in there more. He has more games under his belt this season, and I think he might have a little bit more maturity to his game and situational awareness, especially like in a playoff game. Not going to make those rookie mistakes, so to speak, that maybe Lauko might have to learn the hard way at one point in his career. So I lean Greer, but I do think that Lauko is an adequate, replacement in comparison to what he could bring.
Yeah, I think Lauko brings more speed. So if you're looking for that in a matchup, he would have it. I think he might have a slightly higher offensive ceiling. Not that either one is really like a great offensive player or anything. Greer does have a pretty good shot. So I'll give him that. But yeah, I mean, Lauko maybe a little bit more dynamic of a player with the speed. Greer, I think, brings more physicality. So I think if you're looking for, not that Lauko can't be physical, he can. But if you're looking for we want to have a punishing forecheck and, have those two wingers who can do some damage on the forecheck. I think Greer is more likely to do that. So it's a little bit of what exactly are you looking for? I think I'm with Bridget where I would lean Greer just because he's had more NHL experience this season, but I would definitely like to see Lauko get more chances. I said after the last game, I wanted to get him back in and not have him sit for 2 weeks like he ended up doing. I would like to see him back in again for one of the 2 games this weekend, at least. And, see if he can build some momentum because he deserves it. He's played really well these last 2 games. He's played pretty well every time he's been up this season. So I don't, when everyone's healthy, he's probably going to get sent down just because of a numbers game, and he's the one who doesn't have to go through waivers and all that. But for now, if you have a chance to play him more, I definitely would. And it's not a knock on Greer because I thought he had a couple of pretty good games recently as well. But I think the more experience you can get Lauko, the better, because he could be an option for you at some point in the playoffs.
What I like about him the best is that every time he's gotten called up, he's really done what he needs to make a case for himself in the lineup. And that's something we haven't seen from some of the prospects in the past. Sometimes you see them go cold, or sometimes you see them not make the most of their opportunity, but he brings it. So far this season, he's been what they needed and done what they needed him to every time he got called up.
Yeah, I mean, namely Jack Stanek is a guy who we've talked about in the past, just didn't take advantage of his opportunities, right? I mean, I think Scott, you mentioned that, or somebody mentioned online, but Lauko had 3 minutes and change. Did you mention that, Scott? He was 3 minutes of playing time, and he was just so noticeable. And that's
through 2 minutes. Right? Through 2 periods, it was just over 3 minutes, and then he got another 3 in the third.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean he's a pest out there, and he does have a bit of a motor for sure. I think the question I posed to you guys, I think both of them bring a skating game, right? I mean, you guys mentioned that Greer's a pretty good skater too for his size. I think similar ceilings. The biggest difference between the two of them, I think, is just Greer has a little bit more height and physicality.
And a
Although,
tiger tattoo.
yeah, which we all know Monty's a big fan of. That's quite a decision to make. What's your tattoo? Okay, you're in the lineup.
Well, here's the thing, and this is a hard-hitting question for Scott to ask next time, but who has the cooler tiger tattoo, Tyler Bertuzzi or AJ Greer?
Oh boy. Yeah, I'm
You
gonna.
might get punched in the face over that one. And when I say a hard-hitting question, that means Scott's getting hit really hard in the face for insulting someone's tattoo. But yeah, Bertuzzi.
It's not insulting. No, I can ask in a nice way. I can just.
Who has the cooler tattoo of a tiger? Because Bertuzzi has a big one on his arm, and so does Greer. So.
What would you do if, like, for the playoffs, Monty just walked into the press room with like one of those Mike Tyson head tattoos from like The Hangover or something?
Like in The Hangover, he just wakes up with one. No, I want Scott to get a tiger tattoo. He can be part of the pack, part of the pride.
I don't think that's gonna happen. Maybe a terrier tattoo.
Yeah.
You didn't get a birthday tattoo last night for your 25th?
I don't know. I can't really remember. You know,
there's always a chance on St. Patrick's Day he gets drunk enough and goes for it. And he remembers this conversation, and then he wakes up with the tattoo.
That was my 21st birthday in college, celebrating on St. Patrick's Day. That was.
I thought you meant you got a tattoo on your 21st.
No. I didn't get a tattoo, but
Scott's
in terms
like
of not,
damn it, that would have been a good.
Not remembering what happened.
Scott has like a "Kiss Me, I'm Irish" tattoo on his wrist next time we see him.
Okay,
all right. Anyway,
sorry,
back to the hockey game. Back to the hockey game. So Pavel Zacha got so the first period, as we mentioned, the Bruins got off to a good start, but the rest of the period was pretty slow. I think they had 9 shots through 20, or most of the first 20. What did you see happen to them after such a strong start? They had a power play. They didn't do much with it. It was almost kind of deflated them a little bit. What did you think kind of went wrong for them the rest of the first period? That kind of after that early lead.
Well, penalties for one. I mean, they just started racking up one penalty after another, and a couple of them were needed. Lindholm's they're on a power play, but he has to take an interference because the rush is going the other way. Hathaway just missed a check and ends up with a kneeing penalty. So I didn't think they were like super undisciplined, but that definitely hurt. That clearly like killed their momentum, because I thought they were the better 5-on-5 team most of the night, but you just start constantly going on the penalty kill and really broke their momentum. Their penalty kill was good. Winnipeg finished the game 0-for-5. So, an improvement for at least that half of the special teams equation. But yeah, it did throw them off their 5-on-5 game. I thought it took a little while after kind of getting out of all those penalties for them to sort of get back on track and start to play well again. But the good news is that they didn't give up a goal during any of that. Swayman played really well, and sneaky important game for him, because he'd been a little subpar the past 2 games, definitely Sunday in that loss to Detroit, but even that Thursday night game against Edmonton, especially that last goal where he kind of misplays the puck behind the net. So, I thought this was one of his better games of the season, and just, really strong bounce back that, you wanted to see from him. You don't want him to start potentially slipping at this point in the season.
Yeah, and I'll choose to pick up there, because I think Scott's right about the penalty thing, causing that first to be a little bit weird. And also, it was 7 shots in the first period for the Bruins. So, on goal, at least. Their first shot on goal was the goal. I guess it was 50 seconds in. Really early goal for Frederick. But to pick up on the Swayman topic of conversation, he played so well. 3rd shutout of this season. Looked great. Had the one weird thing I thought, though, was there was 3 or so times where he had his glove closed and then dropped the puck and it popped back out. I don't know what necessarily was going on with that. One time he got a quick whistle, so it didn't matter. And another time it bounced out in front and one of the Bruins defensemen cleared it out of the way. But other than that, really strong game from him. Deserved the shutout at the end of the game when Hellebuck was pulled. I'm thinking, what if he goes for it? What if he goes for that empty net? And then I was just thinking to myself, oh, he probably just cares about the shutout. But in the back of his head, he was thinking,
oh no, he wants a goal. If there had been a chance, he definitely would have gone for it.
Luckily for Winnipeg, there wasn't a clean chance at it for him, but Nosek ended up scoring an empty netter. So,
yeah, he did. Before we get to the, I want to get to the top line or the Bergeron line in a bit. But before we do, I think we'll just touch on the Zacha goal again, or not again, but Zacha scores again. And it was just the latest example of him trusting his shot, using his shot more. And it led to his career high in goals. I think it was his 18th goal of the season. And again, he's just been such a pleasant addition to this team this year. Thoughts on him giving the Bruins a 2-0 lead and in the fashion that he did it?
Yeah, we've seen it all season. He has a really good shot and he can score from distance. And, no team has like a ton of guys who can do that. But he's done it quite a bit and does it there with just a great snapshot up over Hellebuck's shoulder. Yeah, like that's when we were talking about Zacha versus Bertuzzi. Like we were talking about this on Sunday Skate, and we touched on the podcast as well. Like the difference between what Zacha brings to that line versus Bertuzzi, and it's like they're both good playmakers, but Zacha has that ability to score from distance, whereas I think obviously we haven't seen Bertuzzi score yet at all with the Bruins, but when he does score, he's a guy who had 30 goals last year. It's a lot from in close. So it's just, a little bit different dynamic. And I think Zacha plays well on that line because they play so much off the rush that if you have a guy who can score, from the circles or even, a little outside it, like that's dangerous for a rush line. Jim Montgomery has said how he accepts that, that line might go chance for chance and he trusts them because he thinks they're going to come out on top because they're just more talented. Well, like that's how they're more talented. Obviously, Pastrnak can do it. We know that. But when you have the other wing who can also score from distance off the rush, like that's how you end up dramatically outscoring the opposition, even if you're trading chance for chance.
Yeah, and it's important to have that longer shot scorer off the rush, and it's dangerous because that means you can get the shot off before defense can get in position. So you're going to catch them a little bit off guard. You might even catch the goaltender off guard, especially when we're talking about a goalie that's as good as Hellebuck. And unfortunately for Bertuzzi, his shot goes off the post and out, but Zacha's went off the post and in today's game. So, I mean, he's had his best season goal-wise. Frederick, who also scored, is well beyond his best season goal-wise. Now he scored his 15th. So, I mean, you're seeing a lot of guys this year just put up numbers that they haven't been able to in the past.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. That is true. It's been a team-wide effort. Everybody's been kind of playing to their ceiling and then some. But with that said, I do want to bring up the Bergeron line at this point because, ever so often I watch the Bruins and I think to myself, because they do so many things well, and the guys we're talking about are so important to this team, and they're all world players. But this is the second time this year that I can recall that they've gone through a significant dry spell. And when I mean them, I mean Bergeron and Marchand in particular, because I think the first time DeBrusk was out of the lineup, but they've been quiet. There's no doubt about it. We know the power play struggles for this team, right? So the power play hasn't been clicking. So it's not like in the past where like, okay, maybe 5-on-5 they're down, but they're on the power play scoring. The scoring's down all the way around for those guys right now. And dating back the last 6 games for the Bruins, so that is the Rangers game, the Oilers game, both Detroit games, Chicago, and tonight against the Jets. The last 6 games for the Bruins, Marchand, Bergeron, and DeBrusk have a combined 7 points in an 18 combined games, right? 6 games per guy. So I guess just like this isn't the first time this year they've struggled. Is it a sign of them just being a little bit older at this stage in their career, obviously not DeBrusque, or is it injury or ailment, or are they pacing themselves? In those last 6 games, Marchand has 3 points, and the other 2 each have 2 points respectively. So just what are your thoughts on that line? Clearly they're not clicking on all cylinders right now.
Can I go first?
Go.
Okay. So I think I honestly am not sure, Brian, to answer your question. Is it fatigue? Is it pacing themselves? I actually don't really think it was any of the things you listed. I think they might just be a little bit off. And in particular, Marchand, who has 1 goal in the last 8 games, and that's not really a pace that he's usually at a quicker pace than that. I think as a line, they kind of just look like they're, and maybe it's that defenses know what to expect from them. And the matchups that they're getting are obviously good matchups. They're seeing other teams' best defenders at times. So, they're going up against the hardest players to play against defensively. So that might be part of it, but as a whole, they haven't been able to generate as much as usual, get the passing going as much as usual. Maybe teams have kind of solved them a little bit. But I don't think it's fatigue or age or anything like that. I'd be surprised if it was. And I don't think that they're I don't know. I don't think they're lacking, inspiration as much as, well, they could be a little bit, but maybe just they're getting teams' best defensive efforts and they're just a little bit off.
I mean, I think the biggest factor is that Brad Marchand still isn't himself. And
yeah,
he told us that. He told us that a couple of weeks ago. He said that he thought he would feel better than he did after getting double hip surgery in the offseason. And he said, he just hasn't felt like he's been able to get back to being the player he was the last 6 seasons, where he might be slightly under a point per game now, but he's basically been right around a point per game all season. But that's down from where he had been. He had been 90 to 100 points over 80 game seasons, not 80 point pace or 75 point pace. And he said, he just felt like he couldn't really be as completely in control of the puck when he's on it, and in control of kind of play when he's out on the ice. And I think that's it. Not to say it's all about him, or it has nothing to do with Bergeron and DeBrusque. Yeah, I'm sure those guys can be better too, but when and if that line is at its best, it's Marchand driving it. He's the one over, for the last several seasons who's been the best offense. Him and Pasternak are the best offensive players on the team. And Marchand really hasn't been for stretches of this season. And we know why. And he said he doesn't regret getting the surgery. He needed to get it. Otherwise his career could end much sooner than he wanted. But it was a major surgery, and he's still not 100% himself. And I think, I don't know if he's going to get there before the playoffs. I don't know if it might take a full regular off season of regular training, because that's the other thing. It's not just the surgery and what that does to your body. It's you lose your entire off season. You lose everything you usually do to get ready for a season, and trying to do all that during the season is a lot tougher. So, to me, that's the biggest factor. And I think the silver lining is that they, for once, unlike previous years, they have the depth scoring. They have a second, third line, even a fourth line. They have defensemen involved on offense. So you don't have to rely on that line. The other silver lining is they're still not giving up goals. They are one of the best defensive lines in the NHL. So at the very least, they're breaking even pretty much every night. So, how they use that in the playoffs and Whether or not they get going offensively at some point remains to be seen. Obviously, it makes the team a whole, hell of a lot scarier if they do start to turn on offensively and Marchand starts looking like himself. But for now, it hasn't really happened yet.
And can I just point out a stat that I did the math on while Scott was talking. So he's on pace for 27 to 28 goals, depending on how you round, which would be the fewest goals in a season for him if he has 27 in 8 seasons. So, I mean, obviously he missed time in the beginning, so that's going to factor in. But we're looking at a lot of seasons where he has over 30 goals, and right now he's at 20 and on pace to have about 27 or 28. So if you go back and look at those stats, the stats kind of bear that out. Obviously, if he doesn't miss the first month plus of the season, those numbers look different. But just as a point of reference to what the numbers might look like at the end of the season for him, might be right around 27.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that he missed the first month, right? So you could safely assume that would be probably mid-30s, right? Otherwise, but for me, it's not even the goals or lack thereof. It's like, does he look like Marchand out there? And clearly he doesn't, and the reasons are justified, right? And Scott listed all of them off, and I'm not here to bash one of their best players at all. I guess what I'm simply saying is, and Scott, you mentioned like, well, this Bruins team is different. They can weather it because they have the depth. And I agree with that. The problem is, if you go into a playoff series or a playoff season, you can't have your depth scoring turn into your primary scoring. It's only depth scoring if your primary scoring is scoring, right? I mean, I know that's kind of, you can look at it both ways, right? If your depth scoring isn't scoring and your primary scoring isn't scoring, you have no scoring. I get that. I know. I'm just saying, I don't think this Bruins team can win a Stanley Cup if those guys aren't producing significantly more than they are right now. And I'm concerned because I agree with the reasons that you listed off, and I don't blame him for not being the 110-point guy that he was a few years ago, because he didn't have a full off season of training. He didn't have a full preseason. He didn't have a first month of the season. I understand all that. So, but the reality is the playoffs do start in a month. So can he get to that level? And I think it's unfair to assume that he will just because the playoffs are starting. So that's why I think it could be reason for concern a little bit. And
DeBrusk, let's not forget, I have no idea what the recovery is like for, what bone did he break?
No. Is the
funny bone? No.
Either way.
Whichever the smaller of the bones in the lower leg is. I always get them confused. So
me too. That's the problem. But anyway, I have no idea what
I broke one of them and I still get them confused.
Got a skiing accident, by the way. Not a bar fight or anything like that. But no, I don't know what the recovery time on that is either, and what the recovery process for something like that is. I mean, you got to imagine breaking something like that, and you're putting so much force on your legs when you're like cutting at your edge and when you're skating. So, I mean, just take that into consideration as well. They're not. I doubt DeBrusk would say he's 100%. I'm sure he feels pretty good, but that's another, thing to think about when we talk about that line as well, because he's coming back after missing quite a chunk of time. And he took a little bit longer to come back than they originally thought. So, I guess those are all things to put into the equation of why that line might be struggling a little bit right now. But I want to change subjects to
before you do on as far as like, you need your top scorers. I think it's pretty, it's safe to say at this point that their primary scoring line is the check line.
Yeah.
And has been all season. Those are their top 3 5-on-5 scorers. So I think you almost have to look at it a little different than years past, where it's like, yeah, the Bergeron-Marchand line is always going to be listed first on the depth chart, and they might get more minutes and, tougher matchups and all that. But the Zacha Krejci-Pastrnak line, that's the one that's going to need to score. When you talk about, you need your top scorers, yes, I think at some point you're also going to need Marchand, Bergeron, DeBrusk to be going offensively. But to me, Zacha Krejci-Pasternak's, that has become the line that you need consistently going. Like that's at least offensively, that's your top line.
Yeah, and 5-on-5, you mentioned 5-on-5. Remember last year at the end of the season, I feel like we're putting up articles constantly and talking constantly about how they couldn't get things going 5-on-5, and now all of a sudden they can't get things going on the power play, and their 5-on-5 play is, among top in the league. So it's just kind of funny. And obviously we talk about the different pieces they have this year and the depth that they have this year that helps them be able to do that. I mean, the check line, you only had one member on that team last season. So we're talking about different pieces because you don't have Zaki, you don't have Krejci last year to add to that mix.
By the way, I tweeted this, so if you guys saw it, then it's going to be spoiled. But I mentioned the top 3 5-on-5 scorers are Pastrnak 1, Krejci and Zacha now tied for 2. You know who's 4th in 5-on-5 points?
Lindholm?
Who'd you say the first 3 were? Oh, is it Lindholm? Did you say is it Lindholm? No, Coyle?
No.
What were the options? Who were the first 3?
First 3 were Pastrnak 1, Krejci and Zacha tied for 2nd.
Yeah, I feel like it's Coyle. No.
Yeah,
Coyle?
Charlie Coyle 4th in 5-on-5 points.
Pride of Weymouth, man. I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
Pride of the South Shore Kings, 92s. You know what's crazy? I'm looking at the Bruins website right now, and looking at just like their points leaders. I didn't realize just how much Pastrnak is leading the team by in scoring. Like, granted, he's played 8 more games than Marchand, who's next in line, but Pastrnak has 90 points, and the next highest guy is Marchand with 56. That's for a team with so much depth. It's crazy how much of a gap there is between the first and second leading scorers. I know he's played 8 more games. I get that, but that's still 30. What's that? 34 points. That's crazy.
That reminds me, because I thought about this the other day, but I want to look up the last time they had a gap that big between first and second scorer, because I'm gonna guess it's been a while. Like, I'm thinking maybe Joe Thornton, but even that, like, you had like your Glenn Murray, who might have been at least closer than that, but yeah, it's probably been a while.
What about like Mark Savard in like 06? Like, who would have been behind him? Like Brad Boyes or Marco Sturm or something? Maybe Bergeron.
True.
I could check that when Bridget brings up the next point. But,
yeah, I mean, we're gonna end up looking this up by the end of the podcast.
He's gonna look it up right now whenever we change the subject.
I'll take a yeah.
Okay, so you guys want to move on to the defense, because kind of a significant issue, I guess you can say, leaving the game. Forbort doing his thing, he drops the knee down, gets the leg flat on the ice, but takes a puck right to the leg, or was it his ankle?
Yeah, it looked like lower leg-ish, but it's hard to tell exactly.
It was right above the ankle from what I thought I saw, but he has a hard time getting off the ice. He only ends up with 13 minutes of playing time. And we talk about the need for, at the deadline to add another defenseman, and you've just been waiting for the shoe to drop. Now, obviously, we do not have an update yet. We're recording this just after the game, but guys, how does this affect?
Well, we do kind of have a little bit of an update.
That's right.
Matt Porter is in Winnipeg and said Forbort was in a walking boot after the game, and Jim Montgomery said that he's not expected to play the final 2 games of the road trip, so at least out through the weekend. And I'm sure my guess is he might come home now.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I'm assuming he's gonna get more testing done, and then they'll probably have a clearer picture. But yeah, I'd say very safe to rule him out for Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah, so I more mean we don't have an update for long term, I guess you could say. We don't have the evaluation done yet, but yeah, when we saw Jake DeBrusk in the walking boot, that was a long recovery for him. And Foligno, when he got hurt after his game, had crutches and whatnot, and he's still out. So not sure what the prognosis is, as I see Brian smiling about something back there. It's definitely not the injury, but we'll get to that in a second. But guys, how does this affect your rotation, and also, things like your penalty kill, the possible pairings you might be able to put together?
Well, it takes care of the rotation for a while, or for at least for as long as he's out. Now you know who your 6 defensemen are, and you're not worried about having to rotate guys once every 4 games. That said, it also provides an opportunity to get Jakub Zboril in, which Jim Montgomery said he wanted to do at some point on this road trip, anyways. So now you can still rotate someone out if you want to. If someone's a little banged up, like Carlo sitting Tuesday after that hard crash into the boards on Sunday, which, by the way, should have mentioned earlier, on Zaka's goal and also right before it on a Hathaway chance to hit the post, both started with good breakups by Carlo and just inside the D zone, getting the puck quick up ice. I thought he had a really strong game, and Nesson had this stat that since he had that tough stretch where we had 3 straight -2 games during that portion of the schedule where they lost 4 or 5 around the All-Star break. And since then, he has not been a negative, and he is a +18 over the last 15 games. And I know, plus minus, not the best stat, not a be-all, end-all, but in his case, pretty telling. Him and Lindholm as a pairing have just been great and just do not give anything up. Anyways, back to Forbort. Yeah, so you can get Zboril in now. You can, especially Sunday, back-to-back with travel, like, yeah, get someone a rest. Like, whoever needs it most, that's potentially an opportunity to even get Lindholm already sat a game, so maybe a McAvoy or an Orlov gets a game off. But now you can get Zboril in as well. And then the penalty kill, it's going to be interesting to see, because the stats, Forbort in the lineup versus out of the lineup, it's like a 12-point drop. I think it's 88% in games he's played and 76% in games he's missed. But most of those came back in November when he was out with a broken hand. So that was a long time ago. Guys have, had a lot of time to get better at penalty killing since then. So it'll be interesting to see what it looks like. And that could be important, because I don't think Forbort's job was like locked in for the playoffs. I think there was still, a battle going on for ice time and who's in the lineup and all that. So now you get a chance to see, like, all right, does the penalty kill really take that much of a hit with him out, or are they in a better place now than they were in November and they can withstand it?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot more to add on that situation from what Scott said. I think, like, for me, I guess what's worrisome is that Forbort's, like, one of his biggest attributes to this team is just his ability to shot block and get in lanes. And obviously that comes at a price, but it's just like this, you're going to want him to be that warrior type defender in the playoffs and eat those shots left and right. And it's just, this is the second time. Is it the other foot or the same foot? Do we know?
This time it's his right.
I mean, so it's just like
last time it was his hand. It was a broken hand.
Oh, was it his hand? Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I was thinking of DeBrusque.
Or a broken finger specifically.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. That's what it was. Never mind. But I mean, either way, it's like he's just. It's just, I don't know. It's you want, because the war of attrition is so important, right? And I know blocking shots, there is an art form to it, and he's probably one of the better guys in the league at staying healthy while doing it. But the fact that it's starting to, get some leaks in the armor there, it's kind of troublesome, I suppose. But as far as the rotation goes, I mean, I echo everything Scott said. Bridget, what I was laughing at earlier was I was
still laughing.
I was straight up just laughing at the Bruins roster in 06-07. and thinking to myself, and I was also laughing at the plus minus for each player. Like, the fact that the Bruins won a Stanley Cup 4 calendar years later after this roster is absolutely mind-blowing to me. And they turned it around. Like, the next year they made the playoffs for the first time, and they kind of took off. But Savard had 96 points that year. The next closest guy was Bergeron with 70, so 26-point spread. And then the third highest scorer was Glenn Murray with 45 points. So it went 96 points, 70 points, 45 points. And look at Bergeron's plus minus was -28. That's the Dave Lewis era right there. I mean, come on. Bergeron's a minus 28. Look at listen to the minuses on this team. Minus 19, 28, minus 12, minus 24, minus 21, minus 17, minus 22, minus 22. The best plus minus on the team was was 0. It was Peter Kalis, who the hell that was. And Brandon Bachenski was a plus 3. Oh my God, this team was brutal.
That was so that was my senior year of high school, and my friend Jim had season tickets, 2 tickets, and I bought like half the season for the second ticket. So that was probably the year I went to the most games as a fan. And yeah, completely forgettable on the ice. Like that, yeah. So many memories coming back.
That team money.
That team was brutal. Well, our tickets were like $10 a ticket. We were last row of the balcony, so
they were so easy to get back then. I remember in 06, it was January of 06. It was I think it was Martin Luther King Jr. Day, because I think I had school off for some reason, and my dad came home early from work and like woke me up at like, I don't know, 7 or 8 in the morning. I don't know what time it was, and he was like, "Hey, want to go to the Bruins game today?" I think it was a matinee, and they were playing the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim. It was their last year as the Mighty Ducks. I think they won the cup next year. But anyway, it was at the Garden, and Bergeron had like, I think 2 goals and an overtime goal, him and Marco Sturm or something. But it was like, yeah, you could just get a day of game. You go into the Garden, or maybe in the Fleet Center at the time, but it's like just, 40% attendance. Like, yeah, and then they won a cup 4 years later. It's just crazy.
We could like move around to open seats like wherever we wanted. We ended up in the luxury box a couple times. Like security was like nowhere to be found. You could just kind of go wherever you wanted.
The Wild West.
Yeah.
I mean, now that I think about it, that's probably the last year. That season is probably the last time there was ever a non-sellout game at the Garden. Maybe early on in that 07-08 season, like when Lucic was a rookie and Kessel was coming into his own. I think people still didn't like think they were going to make the playoffs. I think the second half of that year they started to kind of fill the seats, but after that, we're talking like 16 years, 15, 16 years of just like sellouts at the Garden, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Got off the rails there. I guess we'll bring it back. I feel like Bridget's really good at bringing it back on the rails. So I don't know if there was something else from the game you wanted to discuss, or Scott.
Shot blocks. We were talking about shot blocks, and I just wanted to mention McAvoy had 5 in the first period, and he had 7 total. So we're talking about guys stepping into lanes. McAvoy did a really good game, I thought, and in particular the shot blocks and the save that he made, because it looked like Swayman made another great stop. It was during a penalty kill. Looked like Swayman made back-to-back huge saves, and it turns out on the replay, the second one was McAvoy's stick in behind Swayman, sending it wide of the net. So saved a goal there and helped Swayman get that shutout.
Yeah, what was a really good game for him. And, you don't usually see games from McAvoy like that with the blocks, because usually he's spending so much time in the offensive zone that there's no need for him to be blocking shots. But yeah, I think it comes back to like what we started with, which wasn't always the prettiest game, but the effort was there. Like they were committed. And I think McAvoy exemplifies that. Like normally a top McAvoy game, he wouldn't even be in his own zone enough to block that many shots, but he had to do some dirty work, and he did. He was committed to it. Like he could have, not gotten in the way of all those shots, but he did. Like he brought the effort and did what it took to want to win.
Yeah. Bridget, you mentioned off the top, I think Swayman shutout. Sometimes I forget to kind of give goalies their due, because they've just been so consistent all year. It's funny. It's like they had one shit game against the Blackhawks, and I'm like, hey, you guys notice Allmark kind of sucked today? It's like, well, that's like the first time all year he's given up more than 3 goals, and of course I call him out. But so great game by Swayman. Nice bounce back performance from the Detroit game, which wasn't his best. Shot blocking was definitely up there. I mean, you could tell the Bruins were desperate tonight to kind of right the ship. That's the takeaway from this game. It wasn't pretty at all throughout most of it, but they got the job done. I mean, Winnipeg was desperate. They're fighting for their playoff lives. So hopefully they can salvage the rest of this road trip and feel good as they go back home. I think they got what, Scott? They're in Minnesota Saturday. Is that another matinee? How many matinees have they been playing the last couple of weeks?
All of them. I don't know. I guess ABC and TNT love having them in those afternoon spots, I guess. So yeah, I think this weekend it's one of them is 1 o'clock, one's 2 o'clock, I think, Minnesota and Buffalo. So.
Minnesota's 2 o'clock, but you want to know what? You can watch the Hockey East Championship game after it, so they don't conflict.
Yeah.
That's right.
Hockey semifinals Friday night, 4 o'clock and 7:30.
So Scott, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do if Merrimack plays BU in the finals? And like Bridget, are you gonna be like mediator or something, or what?
No,
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna be gone. You guys duke it out. I'm out of my horse is out of the race.
We gotta have some sort of friendly wager.
We will. I mean, Scott, there's no doubt about it. No disrespect to my alma mater, but Scott's a way bigger BU fan than I am a Merrimack fan. I'm just kind of hopping on the bandwagon.
Scott, you gonna be there?
No. Well, still possibly for Friday, maybe last minute plan.
I got my credentials.
Yeah. Saturday will be too tough though, with the Bruins playing in the afternoon and then Sunday skate. So I'll watch that from home.
All right. Before I sign off, Bridget, Scott, was there any closing thoughts from either one of you? Right.
One of the things, since we just touched on Allmark having that tough game, I was looking today, just happened to look at his numbers, and that was the first. He had gone 2 months on the dot without having a game where he had a save percentage under 900 until Tuesday night. The league average this year is 900. So he went 2 months without having a single game where he was even league average. Like, just crazy. And one other crazy stat that I saw Thursday night, Sidney Crosby now is locked into averaging at least a point per game this season. He has now averaged a point per game in 18 straight seasons, at least a point per game in 18 straight seasons, which is one short of Wayne Gretzky's record. Also just was like shaking my head at them. Like, that's insane.
Respect.
That is real admirable. That's really cool. Been doing it a long time. It's like, I know it's kind of cringy at this point when you hear people refer to him as Sid the Kid. Guys,
guys.
I feel like Ray Ferraro was like the perfect guy to say that, Sid the Kid or something like that. On like an ESPN broadcast or something. Bridget, any closing thoughts from you?
Nah,
dude. All right. Well, they got the Wild 2 o'clock Saturday, followed by, guess what, Scott? Another matinee Sunday in Buffalo. So when Scott says all of the matinees, he really means all of the matinees. So, hey, no one's complaining about afternoon hockey on the weekends, right? Everyone wants to go to bed early these days, so I don't blame them. But in any event, everybody enjoy your weekends. Plenty of hockey to watch. Bruins, Hockey East, as Bridget mentioned.
Safe St. Patrick's Day.
Yes. Have a very
Scott, I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
Hey, you're the only one not wearing green here.
It's not St. Patrick's Day yet, guys. I'll get you tomorrow.
The podcast is dropping on St. Patrick's Day.
All
People are gonna
right,
be watching this on YouTube on St. Patrick's Day.
Whatever, bro. I had corned beef. Does that count? Can
Bridget,
I get credit?
That does count.
It's literally so. I can't express to you how embarrassing it is that you're not wearing green right now. Really, it's really bothering. It's so embarrassing.
All right, guys.
I actually coincidentally was wearing this. I did not wear this for St. Patrick's Day, but I'm gonna play it off like I did.
Scott definitely did it on purpose.
Yeah, Scott's rocking a sick Jimmy Fun hat. Actually, it's pretty cool. Very nice.
Actually, and like initially, this was just the hat that was closest, and then I was like, oh, and it's St. Patrick's Day, so that worked out nicely.
Shit for no reason.
I was half expecting Scott to wear one of those like priest Irish things with like the orange mutton chops on here, like a little leprechaun. But maybe next year, Scott. Now that you know what I'm looking for on St. Patrick's Day. All right. People listening are like, all right, end the podcast. So that is exactly what I'm going to do right now. So everybody, thank you so much for listening and enjoy the rest of your weekend.